Li ran, let's get a divorce. Shi Shi has returned. Jing Yan crouched in front of me, humbly and remorsefully pleading. I promised her, she will be the only wife in my life. I trembled violently, my heart felt like it was being cut by a knife, my eyes were so red they could bleed, and my mind was a mess. I swatted his hand away. So, I don't even have the right to be your concubine? Your status, how could I bear to let you be a concubine? A divorce is for the best. I've already arranged a place for you. You will marry Heir Apparent Yuan and become his wife. Didn't you say you could do anything for me? Just this one thing. If father knows it was me who proposed the divorce, he won't let Shi Shi enter the door. Ran, this is the only thing I ask of you. Ding! RoyalStory reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. I grew up alongside Jing Yan, a childhood betrothal. Is it not as good as the unexpected encounter between him and Shi Shi at the flower viewing banquet? I treasured him like a gem, while he viewed me as worthless. This is the man I have loved for more than 10 years. After 3 years of marriage, he treated me coldly, repeatedly reminding me that I would never compare to Shi Shi. Tears streamed down my face, merging with my heartache, turning into sharp blades. My heart was already riddled with wounds. I was tired. Having been humble for too long, for the last time, I stubbornly refused to show any weakness. I looked at him with pride. Jing Yan, I actually don't love you as much as I imagined. Parting ways means we owe each other nothing, which is good. My father is a man from the martial world. When I was 3, my family faced great misfortune, and I was taken back to Su Manor by Uncle Su, where I have lived ever since. Since childhood, everyone in the manor raised me as Jing Yan's wife. Except for him. He has told me more than once, Li ran, I don't like you, I will never marry you. You should give up this hope. He was lying to me. Jing Yan treated me so well. Like all the love stories, there are heroes saving beauties, the osmanthus cake he bought in the rain, and my illness where he stayed up all night to guard me. Although he rejected my affection, he would apologize afterward. He was just shy. I am a daughter of the martial world, and I was born with thick skin. If he took a step back, I would take a step forward. Until that time when Jing Yan took me to the flower viewing banquet, he saved the drowning Miss Shi Shi. For the first time, I saw desire in his eyes, a look he had never given me. It turned out, he truly had no place for me in his heart. My heart turned to ashes. But Shi Shi got married. I thought I had a chance. After Jing Yan fell seriously ill, when he woke up, he held my hand. Ran, let's get married. On our wedding night, I anxiously waited, but what came was him pinning me down, mumbling the name of another woman. My husband, on our wedding night, called out the name of someone else. Afterward, he apologized to me and said he would forget Shi Shi. I comforted myself. I grew up with Jing Yan. True hearts exchange true hearts. I am so good, even willing to cast aside my nature to mimic Shi Shi's temperament and attire. I believed that he would be melted by me. After 3 years of marriage, he had never touched me. Except for that one accidental incident 2 months ago. That day, Shi Shi wrote to him for help. She married the wrong man. She arranged to meet Jing Yan, and I found out, filled with jealousy and unwillingness. Shi Shi was covered in injuries. She had been badly mistreated. She dashed into Jing Yan's arms, and that was the first time in 3 years I saw him truly heartbroken. It turned out, he could feel pity, he just didn't feel it for me. That night, he stayed with her all night, I stayed with him all night. The cold moon in the sky turned to frost. I had made up my mind. Let them be together. The next day, I was told by a servant that Jing Yan had caught a cold in the plum garden. I rushed over. He was always honest, and told me that Shi Shi had returned and that there would be no further contact between them. I vaguely sensed that I was just a dispensable substitute in his heart. When she came, I was abandoned. When she left, he beckoned me, and I wagged my tail and ran back to him. I humbled myself to the mud, hoping to exchange for a tiny corner of his heart. He turned away. After he recovered, he came to apologize to me. I usually have a good tolerance for alcohol, but that day, after just a few light drinks, I lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was lying in his arms, my clothes disheveled. He had red eyes and said he was sorry. Fool, we are husband and wife, what is there to be sorry about? 2 months later, Shi Shi returned, truly returned. She obtained the divorce papers and told Jing Yan she regretted it. Jing Yan belongs to Shi Shi, I am just a shameless usurper. They are in love, what am I? I am tired. Let's get a divorce. What I didn't tell him was that I was pregnant. After all, he loves Shi Shi so much, this child in my belly, I'm sure he wouldn't care much about. I found Uncle Su and told him I no longer loved Jing Yan and wanted a divorce. Uncle Su was shocked and dropped his teacup, repeatedly confirming whether Jing Yan had bullied me. Yes, I was bullied. He crushed my sincere heart, robbing me of the ability to love, rely on, and trust. But I stubbornly told Uncle Su that after 3 years of marriage, we had never consummated our marriage. I concealed that one accidental incident. Uncle Su disagreed, it was too absurd. He was furious for the first time and called Jing Yan to question him in front of me. Jing Yan glanced at me, guilt in his eyes. He knew my feelings for him but had given everything to Shi Shi, leaving me with nothing more. Father, a forced marriage will bear no fruit. Let's go with Ran's wishes. I smiled self-deprecatingly. For the first time, I realized that Jing Yan was nothing more than this. Consider it as repaying the Su family for raising me. Uncle Su was furious to the point of having red eyes. I took the divorce papers and refused to stay in the manor any longer. Jing Yan walked me out, and outside, a carriage was waiting. Jing Yan handed me a stack of silver notes. Ran, don't be afraid. The heir apparent Yuan was injured on the battlefield when he was young and cannot perform marital duties. It's just a change of place. If you miss home, you can come back anytime. Since you abandoned me, why pretend to be so sentimental to make me waver? This was the first time I spoke harshly to him, he looked slightly startled. I pulled down the curtain, and the carriage moved steadily. My mind was racing, as if I were in a different world. The heir apparent Yuan's residence has arrived. I have been in the capital for quite a while and have long heard of heir apparent Yuan's reputation as a complete scoundrel, driving his parents to despair. In this vast heir apparent's residence, he is the only one living freely and comfortably. As I entered the courtyard, I caught a glimpse of heir apparent Yuan lazily lying in the sun, dressed in a red robe, his sleeves fluttering gently. Even with his eyes closed, one could see his charming demeanor. Here you? Heir apparent Yuan opened his eyes, his romantic peach blossom eyes sparkling, but the look in his eyes was distant and cold, like a flower on a high mountain, unattainable. He dismissed all the servants and stared at my swollen eyes for a moment before sneering, pathetic. Then he lazily leaned back and shot me a sidelong glance. Do you know that Jing Yan and I made a trade? You came into my residence, and he got the position of the purple robe marquis? I know! I admired him but wasn't foolish. Perhaps my calm demeanor surprised him, he looked slightly taken aback, and the mockery in his expression deepened. Foolish! It is foolish, I replied, but your highness, your trade is a loss. Not to mention that I was once married, I also have a child in my belly, which will only bring shame to you. Heir apparent Yuan couldn't hide his surprise, he knows? And still let you come? I didn't tell him, I said, and there was no need to. Heir apparent Yuan stared at me for a moment and scoffed, foolish. I wasn't sure if he was calling me foolish or Jing Yan. Do you know what he sent you to the residence for? I know. As for me, I never suffer losses and never take on a name for nothing. From now on, you will be responsible for the flowers and plants in the courtyard, heir apparent Yuan declared. I understood, he meant that becoming his wife was impossible. In truth, I never even considered becoming his wife. Heir apparent Yuan had butler Zhang arrange a room for me. I wanted a quiet place, a bit remote was fine. Heir apparent Yuan lazily said, suit yourself, just don't let my flowers die. Butler Zhang took me over, he was a kind-looking man who didn't show any disdain for my awkward status. He told me that heir apparent Yuan liked to sleep in a bit longer in the morning and preferred not to be disturbed while sleeping. He advised me not to come too early and shared some taboos and rules, which I memorized one by one. He also informed me that the monthly wages for the servants in the heir apparent's courtyard were 20 taels. And they would make 4 sets of clothing a year, too thin and too thick. The winter clothes hadn't been made yet, so he took me to get 2 sets of thin ones first. Though the room was a bit remote, it was quite clean, with ready-made bedding that I just had to lay out. It was only my first day. Butler Zhang suggested I take some time to adjust and would come back tomorrow. He told me when and where dinner would be served before he left. After Butler Zhang left, I went out through the back door. I headed to the pharmacy. I bought miscarriage medicine. If it were in the past, learning that I was pregnant with Jing Yan's child would have made me happy, but now, I just wanted to start a new life. Over the years, I had developed an obsession, always trailing behind him, humbly forgetting myself, trapping myself in a corner, unwilling to step out. Just as I exited the pharmacy, it started to rain a bit. I braved the rain back to the heir apparent's residence and borrowed a stove to brew medicine in my room. After taking the medicine, I lay down. The doctor had told me that a miscarriage would be very painful, and when the expected pain came, I couldn't help but curl up. My thoughts gradually became muddled, and just before I fell into a deep sleep, I seemed to see a figure in red rushing towards me anxiously. When I woke up, it was already the next morning. The little maid guarding me saw me open my eyes and hurriedly ran out. Before long, Heir Apparent Yuan came in. He pulled up a chair and sat by the bed, looking extremely disdainful. Ran, are you stupid? Don't you know if you're pregnant? If it weren't for my little pet bird flying into the courtyard, my heir apparent's residence would have become a haunted house. I am not pregnant? I was taken aback. Although I hadn't experienced it myself, I could feel that my body seemed fine. Yet my period was indeed delayed. What kind of mediocre doctor did you find? Heir Apparent Yuan said sharply. After finishing, he suddenly leaned forward, coming close to my face. He truly was stunningly handsome. His slightly upturned eyes seemed to capture all the colors of the world. Not only are you not pregnant, but you are also still a virgin. Put away that look in your eyes. I'm not interested in you. It was a female doctor who examined you. Not that. I paused, puzzled about how that incident had happened. After waking up in Jing Yan's arms, he had tacitly acknowledged that we had consummated our marriage. It seems that the young master of the Su family has some hidden issues. The insinuation was quite evident. I wasn't defending Jing Yan, it was just that for Heir Apparent Yuan to say that someone else had hidden issues was somewhat strange. Life in the heir apparent's residence had been relatively peaceful. I mostly watered the plants and tended to the flowers, which were leisurely tasks. Of course, this was only the beginning. For instance, this particular young master didn't like noise while sleeping in his courtyard, and all the servants were outside. Sometimes, I would serve tea and water and take care of the writing supplies. Although I was doing the work of a servant, it didn't feel like I was a servant in the heir apparent's residence. I tried my best to minimize my presence and do my job diligently, but Heir Apparent Yuan always found ways to irritate me. Having been in the Su family for many years, I considered myself quite patient, but he had a knack for breaking my composure every time. It seemed he delighted in seeing me flustered and angry. Whenever he riled me up, he would casually drop a line. Where did that spirit from when you beat me at 10 years old go? Even a wooden post in my residence is more interesting than you. At 10 years old, this young master was already causing trouble in the capital. A few little scoundrels had blocked Jing Yan, he was no match for them. I was the one who stepped in. I still remember Heir Apparent Yuan in his purple robe, angrily pointing at me and saying, Ran, are you blind? Well, I truly was blind. In those early years, I was quite lively, with a spirit that was a bit wild, climbing trees to steal bird eggs, catching fish, and fighting with the neighborhood boy, disguising myself as a boy to visit brothels and watch beautiful sisters. After marrying Jing Yan, I gradually learned to temper my temperament and mimic others. Looking back now, I feel it was foolish. Ran, you are the only one who has ever ridden me since childhood. If I don't take revenge, I'll write my name backward. Heir Apparent Yuan raised an eyebrow slightly. I rode and beat him. Please don't skip over that, it sounds so strange. I instinctively asked, how does your highness plan to take revenge? Heir Apparent Yuan was as proud as a peacock in full display, leaving me with a rather strange smile. On this day, a new tavern opened in the city, and I went there with Heir Apparent Yuan. Before leaving, he tossed me a straw hat. Inside the tavern, many of his friends were present. Since it was the first time they saw him bring a woman, they were all curious to see my face beneath the hat. They were all given a word from Heir Apparent Yuan. Scram! The waiter introduced the dishes, most of them on the sweeter side. Heir Apparent Yuan frowned. She doesn't like sweet food, just a couple of sweet dishes will do, the rest can follow the menu as is. I was slightly taken aback. I had been married to Jing Yan for many years, and he didn't even know I didn't like sweet food. Yet here, just a few days into my stay at the heir apparent's residence, Yuan had already noticed. I felt a little moved. But a whole menu seems excessive, doesn't it? There are just the two of us, we won't finish it. I said. Heir Apparent Yuan glanced at me and said, saving me money? Before I could respond, he told the waiter, listen to her. Halfway through, I stepped out without my hat and unexpectedly ran into Uncle Sue and Auntie Sue. I followed them into a private room. Uncle Sue clearly knew I had just come out of Heir Apparent Yuan's room. He spoke earnestly, Ran, you grew up in the Sue residence. We treat you like our own child. If you and Jing Yan truly have no fate together, we won't force it. But what about you and Heir Apparent Yuan? How will you marry in the future if this gets out? Yes, these past few days, I've asked Jing Yan to find out about you, wanting to bring you back, but I haven't been able to learn anything. Auntie Sue added. I suddenly felt foolish and ridiculous, like a fool being toyed with. In my ears were the old couple urging me to return to the right path. Why should I hide the truth from Jing Yan and suffer myself? It was Uncle Sue and Auntie Sue who raised me, not Jing Yan. Once I realized this, I laid everything bare, and Uncle Sue's expression changed drastically. I knelt and bowed 3 times. I will always remember your kindness in raising me, and it won't change because of him. I ask you, Uncle and Auntie, to respect my wishes. As I opened the door to leave, I felt the heavy weight in my heart lift. It turned out I didn't need to suppress myself, it felt so liberating. My days in the heir apparent's residence were vastly different from those in the Sue residence. The reason being, Heir Apparent Yuan's life was indeed colorful. Heir Apparent Yuan held an official position in court, otherwise, Jing Yan wouldn't have negotiated with him over the position of the marquis in the first place. But I had been here for some time and had never seen him attend court. I once subtly advised him, and he tossed me a stack of official documents, adding, a proud genius doesn't need to work too hard, otherwise, being too brilliant will only bring disaster. Just as I thought. Sometimes he would have servants accompany him, but unfortunately, due to their status, the servants didn't quite let loose. Old butler Zhang was getting on in years and lacked energy, always pushing me out to play. I lost at cricket. I lost at card games. I lost at throwing pots. I successfully lost everything, even my future 10 years' worth of earnings. Heir Apparent Yuan was so pleased, and butler Zhang laughed happily beside him, generously lending me 20 taels. Feeling invigorated, I decided to challenge him 300 more rounds, and this time I won. Heir Apparent Yuan let me win. He didn't show it obviously, but I could still tell. He was just stubborn. Let me tell you some news. Jing Yan misappropriated disaster relief funds, spending lavishly to win a smile from a beauty, and has been impeached, demoted, and punished. I lowered my head and calculated for a moment. He has only held the position of marquis for 2 months. Yes. Heir Apparent Yuan took a sip of tea. I told him long ago that with his abilities, he wouldn't be able to hold the position of marquis. I thought I would feel a bit sad, but instead, I felt a little schadenfreude. If you want to laugh, just laugh. Why hold it in? Well, I was indeed quite happy. I waved the silver I won in my hand. Your Highness, how about treating you to a drink? Let's go. Coincidentally, my celebratory drink coincided with Jing Yan's sorrowful drink. Ran? Jing Yan stared blankly at me, laughing and talking with Heir Apparent Yuan. Heir Apparent Yuan had just shared a funny story from court, and I was laughing so hard I could barely breathe, while Heir Apparent Yuan patted my back with a look of disdain. Shi Shi was also there. She had originally planned to talk to Jing Yan to attract his attention, but upon catching sight of Heir Apparent Yuan, she was completely stunned, her eyes revealing her surprise. Heir Apparent Yuan was indeed devastatingly handsome. No one could compare in terms of looks. Jing Yan's expression darkened as he stared at me intently. My thoughts weren't on him. I suddenly remembered what the older sisters in the whorehouse used to say when drinking. About how some young master took a certain medicine and revived his vigor, spending the night with 10 women. I figured Heir Apparent Yuan hadn't thought of that after so many years, otherwise, I could quietly ask them about it for Heir Apparent Yuan on another day. Sure, this is the sister I mentioned to you, Li Ran, Jing Yan said, looking at me, and I vaguely sensed a hint of resentment in his expression. He probably thought that after leaving him, I should be gloomy, but unexpectedly, I seemed to be doing quite well. Ran, dear sister, Shi Shi approached with a smile, but her eyes were fixed on Heir Apparent Yuan. Heir Apparent Yuan frowned slightly, took a step back, and stood behind me, showing his disdain openly. Ran, I'm most afraid of dogs. You must protect me well, don't let me get bitten by a dog. I was slightly moved by his call of Ran. Jing Yan also came over, and he and Shi Shi synchronized their dark expressions. Your Highness, your status is noble, speaking such harsh words may be unbecoming. There are always those who insist on taking things personally. I couldn't help but retort, my affection completely worn away, leaving only disgust. Heir Apparent Yuan laughed openly, and after saying, Ran is absolutely right, we stepped into the tavern first. I didn't dwell on encountering Jing Yan at the tavern. Instead, I felt a bit regretful. Why was it he who proposed the divorce and not me? It felt like after a quarrel with someone, you return home only to realize you didn't perform well during the argument, wanting to argue again. My mood was just like that now. Heir Apparent Yuan and I ordered a table full of delicious dishes and a few jars of fine wine. By the end, I collapsed on the table in a drunken stupor. I vaguely saw Heir Apparent Yuan staggering toward me, faintly hearing him say Ran. I caught a glimpse of his lazy peach blossom eyes reflecting a small version of me. Then, a cool kiss landed on my lips, and my entire body went numb. I was startled awake. I was in my own room, dressed and washed up before heading out, where I met butler Zhang. He informed me that yesterday, both Heir Apparent Yuan and I got drunk, and he and a maid came to bring us back. Heir Apparent Yuan was still not sober, so I didn't have to wake up so early. I sighed in relief, so it was just a dream. Li Ran, how could your thoughts be so depraved? In the following days, everything continued as usual. Following Heir Apparent Yuan, I successfully returned to my lively and cheerful self after initially pretending to be gentle and quiet for Jing Yan. My every move no longer imitated Shi Shi. Butler Zhang kindly told me that this was how a young lady should be, full of life. One day, I disguised myself as a man and went to a whorehouse. As soon as I reached the second floor, someone grabbed my arm. I turned around and met a pair of incredulous, blood-red eyes. I frowned, pushed him away in disgust, and felt an urge to change my clothes. Ran? Jing Yan's voice was filled with unspoken pain and disappointment. He actually let you come to a place like this? It was clear how little he understood me. I had come here even before marrying him. He reeked of alcohol, and upon seeing him, I felt no ripples in my heart, not even a desire to explain. I turned and walked away. Wait. Jing Yan quickly caught up and blocked my path. I have something to say to you. I have nothing to say to you, I replied. My mind was preoccupied with the thought that if I stayed any longer, Miss Su would no longer be receiving guests, and I would have made the trip for nothing. Ran, Shi and I are not married yet, my parents haven't agreed. Jing Yan looked at me, I don't blame you. Even if we can't be husband and wife, you are still my most cherished sister. But Gu Yuan is not a good man. He is unpredictable. Do you know he is scheming behind my back? My position as Marquis. I'm not a good man? It's Heir Apparent Yuan. He stood high above, his tone lazy, and from my position, he seemed quite imposing. His peach blossom eyes held a hint of a smile as he scanned the room, his gaze landing on me. I hadn't done anything, yet at that moment, facing Heir Apparent Yuan, I inexplicably felt a twinge of guilt. Jing Yan's expression darkened instantly, and he silently blocked my way. I found it laughable and said softly, wasn't it you who sent me to the heir apparent's residence in the first place? Now, pretending to be the good guy? How disgusting. I saw him stiffen slightly, and I couldn't be bothered to engage. I pushed him aside and headed upstairs. Young boy, you look quite handsome. What is your relationship with Jing Yan? One of the rascals approached, but before he could finish, Heir Apparent Yuan kicked him away, his tone impatient. Are you still drinking? Drink, I drink. A group of rascals followed him away. I smiled slightly, feeling a warmth in my heart. I met Miss Su, who recognized that I was in disguise. I shared my purpose with her, and she paused for a moment before smiling. There is such a remedy, but I don't know if it will work for your gentleman. You can go back and try it. My face flushed, and I didn't want to explain further. I thanked her and left. As I got up, Miss Su gave me a meaningful glance. Miss Lee, a few days ago, several officials came to hear. Under the influence of alcohol, they mentioned an incident. 4 months ago, Heir Apparent Yuan broke the leg of Prince Lin, causing a stir that even the Emperor and Empress addressed. However, for unknown reasons, it was eventually suppressed. I understood immediately. Miss Su knew my identity and understood why I was here. But why did she tell me about the conflict between Heir Apparent Yuan and Prince Lin? Was she hinting that the two were at odds? Should I be wary of Prince Lin? She didn't intend to say more, so I thanked her and left. When I went downstairs, I saw Jing Yan standing at the entrance, clearly blocking my way. He hadn't changed at all. After being hurt by Shi Shi, he came to me to heal. I scoffed coldly and exited through the back door. Once outside, I caught a glimpse of a tall figure lazily leaning against the wall. His lips curled into a playful smile, his eyes as detached as always. It was Gu Yuan. I felt an odd sensation that he was waiting for me, and my steps lightened. Before I could call out, several dark figures leaped down from the wall. In the moonlight, the cold, gleaming sword with a bloodthirsty intent pierced my arm, and I caught a glimpse of shock in the eyes of Heir Apparent Yuan, who was blocked by me. His eyes darkened slightly, and with a flick of his folding fan, before I could see his move clearly, the dark-clothed men fell to the ground. I pulled the sword out of my arm, and Heir Apparent Yuan wrapped his arms around my waist, carrying me into the nearest medical clinic. He found the old doctor too rough and decided to bandage my wound himself. Young madam, your husband treats you really well, the old doctor said with a smile. My face heated up, and just as I was about to explain, Heir Apparent Yuan lazily said, "She's afraid of pain." The words I had on the tip of my tongue were swallowed back. He didn't explain our relationship. The wind suddenly picked up, rippling the calm waters of spring. In the dead of night, with just a man and a woman alone, over-explaining would only complicate things, I told myself. For some reason, my thoughts felt chaotic, and something deep within me stirred, only to be forcefully suppressed. So much so that when he carried me back to his residence, I didn't even react. I was injured in my arm, not my legs. I could walk on my own. Are you stunned? I came to my senses and caught a glimpse of his handsome profile, partially obscured by the night. The only thing visible was his taut jawline. No. Next time, don't foolishly jump out to protect me. Do you think I'm Jing Yan that need to protect? I can handle myself, you just stand behind me. Just stand behind him? My eyes turned warm, and I felt a strong panic inside me, my emotions spiraling out of control. What if you can't handle it? My voice was too soft. I thought he hadn't heard me, but he chuckled. Want to give it a try? Try what? I dared not think further, my confusion deepened. Were those people sent by Prince Lin? I changed the subject. Heir Apparent Yuan glanced at me, perhaps sensing the anxiety in my tone or surprised that I even knew. I heard from Miss Su. 4 months ago, you broke Prince Lin's leg. Is he seeking revenge on you? What happened between you two? Did he provoke you? I just couldn't stand him, so I beat him up. He still wore that nonchalant expression. He didn't want to say more, so I didn't press further. Perhaps I was too tired. I fell asleep in his arms. In my dreams, I vaguely heard the word fool. The next day, I woke up and it was already noon. Butler Zhang informed me that Gu Yuan had gone south to the South City. The issue of the water disaster in the South City was originally handled by the Purple Robe Marquis. Commander Su. But he was dismissed. So Prince Lin recommended that the heir apparent Yuan go instead. He came back from the palace to look for you, but you weren't awake yet. Just last night, the assassination attempt on Gu Yuan had just occurred, and now he was heading south. It was clearly a trap, and Gu Yuan was really bold to go. How long has he been gone? About half an hour. By the way, the heir apparent Yuan asked you to steer clear of Prince Lin. If I thought a little more about this, I could glean a lot of information from that statement, not limited to the fact that Gu Yuan and Prince Lin had a conflict. And I just happened to be from the heir apparent's household, which is why he cautioned me so. I knew very well that since Gu Yuan had gone, he must have his own plans, but I couldn't help feeling anxious in my heart. I just wanted to ask him directly. I mounted my horse and chased after him. Once I exited the city gate, I ran into Prince Lin. He was being pushed down the city gate by his attendants, a thin blanket draped over his legs. Did Gu Yuan use such heavy hands that he actually injured him? I thought to myself, it was only Gu Yuan, the Empress Dowager's nephew. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't even have a life left. Isn't this Mrs. Su? No, wait, it's Miss Li. Prince Lin glanced at me and smiled, and I found that smile very displeasing, as if he were eyeing prey. I hurriedly bowed and was about to leave when he spoke again. What a pity. Prince Lin waved his thumb with a jade ring. You were just a little bit away from being my woman. A sense of unease suddenly rose in my heart. What do you mean by that, Your Highness? But Prince Lin said nothing more. I couldn't be bothered to engage with him. I knew he wouldn't reveal anything. And moreover, he was a prince. Confronting him head-on would only lead to my disadvantage. I continued my pursuit but went quite far without catching up, returning empty-handed. On the way back, I kept thinking about Prince Lin's words. A vague truth began to surface in my mind. First, I sent someone to the Su residence to meet with Su Jing Yan, then I went to the Zhou residence and invited Zhou Shi Shi out. With Su Jing Yan not present, she didn't need to disguise herself. She clearly disliked me, her tone very unfriendly. Miss Li, I've heard rumors that the heir apparent Yuan is impotent. I'm quite curious, how do you serve him on a daily basis? That was indeed a very malicious remark. I smiled lightly. What's wrong? Can't Su Jing Yan satisfy you? She was slightly taken aback, her beautiful face turning ugly with disdain. Li ran. Do you think you are some virtuous woman? You're just a discarded shoe that Su Jing Yan didn't want. Don't forget, it was I who made you a discarded wife. Speaking of which, I really should thank you for your interference, otherwise, how would I have met such a wonderful heir apparent Yuan? I wasn't the least bit angry, my face radiating happiness. The heir apparent Yuan is exceptionally handsome, holds a distinguished position, treats people kindly, and only cares for me. He is indeed much better than Su Jing Yan. Li ran. Are you trying to provoke me? Zhou Shi said haughtily, I can take Su Jing Yan from you, I can also take the heir apparent Yuan. Want to give it a try? I pretended to be surprised. Aren't you supposed to be marrying Su Jing Yan? Have you lost interest in him? Don't you love Su Jing Yan to the point of obsession? I'll just return him to you. I see, Su Jing Yan has always been your backup choice, hasn't he? So what if he is? I'm just pursuing a better happiness. If Su Jing Yan loves me, he should support me. Besides, he willingly wants to love me, not that I'm begging him. I smiled slightly and took a step back. Not far behind me, Su Jing Yan stood frozen. He probably didn't expect that I would be the one to invite him, only to stumble upon such a scene. Zhou Shi was equally shocked. Thanks to Su Jing Yan, I had come to understand Zhou Shi. If she had a better option, she would absolutely not choose Su Jing Yan. Being a backup, I knew all too well how deeply the knife could cut. Su Jing Yan's face darkened. Zhou Shi, I see through you today. I took another step back, leaning against a rockery to watch the drama unfold. The once deeply devoted couple now faced each other with ugly expressions, their faces twisted. Moreover, these two were digging up each other's dark pasts. For example, Su Jing Yan said that after Zhou Shi married, she often complained to him behind her husband's back, truly a case of stepping out on her marriage. And Zhou Shishi said that Su Jing Yan was the pot calling the kettle black, as he also met her behind my back when we were married, acting shamelessly. The two were arguing fiercely. I clicked my tongue. What on earth had I loved him back then? The heir apparent Yuan was indeed not lying to me, I truly was blind. In comparison, he was like a bright moon in the sky. Why did he suddenly come to mind? My thoughts spiraled out of control, and memories of the heir apparent flooded my heart. I realized that all my happiness over these days had been brought to me by him. He taught me to understand that I should become an independent self, not to rely on others and become unrecognizable. My heart trembled uncontrollably, I was actually thinking about him. Ran, let's go. Su Jing Yan walked up to me, and I looked up. Had they finished arguing? Li ran, make sure you see the person in front of you clearly. Don't let him deceive you. 4 months ago, he used you as a cover to meet me in the plum garden, and he deliberately drugged your drink. I felt my gaze grow cold. Explain yourself. Zhou Shishi and Su Jing Yan had fallen out. She hated me, but she hated Su Jing Yan even more than me, so she wouldn't let us be together. She glanced at Su Jing Yan and smugly said, "When you woke up that day, did you think you had consummated your marriage with him?" Su Jing Yan visibly panicked and shouted at Zhou Shishi, "Shut up." Then he turned to me and said, Ran, I will explain everything to you. Can I take you away? Don't you know? That man related to you that day is Prince Lin. Zhou Shishi exclaimed loudly, Prince Lin has been interested in you for a long time. Su Jing Yan even tried to give you to Prince Lin in exchange for high officials' positions and salaries. Unfortunately, Heir Apparent Yuan showed up out of nowhere. Heir Apparent Yuan, Prince Lin. A broken leg. Scattered events began to connect in my mind, and suddenly a thought arose within me. Though Gu Yuan held an official position, he had not been involved in the promotion of officials. At that critical moment, he intervened and seized Prince Lin's power. He even broke Prince Lin's leg. Is it as I think? My heart raced, unable to calm down for a long time. Ran. Don't touch me. I took a few steps back, my eyes revealing my disgust. I find you repulsive. Su Jing Yan's eyes were filled with pain. I'm sorry, I truly didn't know that making you drink the drugged wine would lead to you being bullied by him. I've always felt guilty. You feel guilty, but you still did it, I said coldly. I had not lost my innocence, but I didn't need to tell him. He didn't deserve to know. I still had one doubt. Why did Zhou Shishi and Su Jing Yan both think I had lost my innocence? What had happened in between? Did Gu Yuan know the hidden truth? Su Jing Yan, you deserve this. Zhou Shishi laughed triumphantly. She had succeeded. What she didn't know was that even without her, I would not turn back. However, I truly despised her. I smirked and deliberately said, Zhou Shishi, thank you for letting me know that Su Jing Yan is such a petty person. In comparison, Heir Apparent Yuan is truly a rare gentleman. Zhou Shishi's expression was as if she had eaten a fly. Clearly, this was not the result she wanted. Since that day, Su Jing Yan and Zhou Shishi had completely fallen out. Zhou Shishi spread rumors about Su Jing Yan, and the whole city was discussing it. Once a couple deeply in love, they now looked at each other with disdain. Su Jing Yan began to seek me out frequently. He spent entire nights squatting at the gate of the heir apparent's residence, refusing to leave even in the pouring rain. He bore thorny branches, wanting to apologize. He bit his finger and wrote me a blood letter. He finally saw my worth after I stopped loving him. I didn't see him. I even found him annoying. Half a month later, I went out, not to see him but because Heir Apparent Yuan had written me a letter. The content of the letter was somewhat strange. It was like a husband writing to his wife while being away. But we were not in that kind of relationship. Moreover, the letter clearly provided me with an address for a reply. In this odd situation, I replied to him in a similar affectionate tone as his letter and went out to deliver it. Ran, you finally came out to see me. Su Jing Yan forced a smile. He had lost a lot of weight, his eyes were sunken, filled with deep guilt. Can we go back to the past? No. I dropped that one sentence and tried to leave, but Jing Yan grabbed my sleeve. I felt a surge of disgust and pushed him away, tearing off the part of the sleeve he had touched right in front of him. Jing Yan, listen well. Even if you wait 5 years or 10 years, my answer won't change. I no longer love you. Have you fallen in love with Heir Apparent Yuan? The question came from behind me. My heart skipped a beat, and I didn't answer him. I ran to the post station to deliver the letter, and after sending it, I found a place nearby to hide. Before long, I saw Prince Lin. Back at home, I felt anxious. I worried I was overthinking. I shouldn't have replied to the letter, yet I felt I should have. He must be plotting something. I didn't dare to seek him out recklessly. Fortunately, the letters never stopped coming. However, the content of Gu Yuan's letters changed from restrained at first to increasingly explicit. He even mentioned wanting a child after he returned. Back and forth, I understood, I just needed to reply to his letters. Every time I replied, I blushed uncontrollably. I couldn't judge whether I was writing sweet nothings out of necessity or if there was a touch of sincerity. The letters stopped coming after half a month. I waited another half month, but still no letter arrived. I couldn't stay at home any longer. I began to linger at the post station's entrance. Finally, I received a letter, but it was from Butler Zhang, trembling and tear-streaked, saying, "Miss Li, the Heir Apparent Yuan is gone." At that moment, I fell into an endless abyss. It felt as if someone was choking my throat, and the darkness before my eyes consumed me. When I woke up, a man in white was beside me. Awake? I had seen him before. He was one of Gu Yuan's extravagant friends, named Yan, and he knew medicine. As he tidied up his things, he said, "You've been asleep for 3 days. What about him? Any news?" "He's next door," Yan said, "but there's no hope." My mind exploded with shock as I staggered over. Butler Zhang was in the room crying, and I saw the man lying on the bed, his face pale as death. It felt like my heart was being cut out. Gu Yuan. I leaned over the bed, a thick, inescapable fear enveloping me, and uncontrolled emotions surged up as I trembled. "Don't die." At that moment, I realized the feelings I had been too afraid to face deep down. "I still have things to tell you. I haven't had the chance to say." Ran? A weak voice came. I looked up, tears still in my eyes, and stared blankly at the man on the bed who had opened his eyes. Though weak, he was definitely not on the brink of death. "You just said you had something to tell me? What is it?" Gu Yuan asked. "Mr. Yan, if my family's heir has woken up, does that mean everything is fine?" Butler Zhang wiped his tears and asked. "It's fine now." I turned to look at Yan. Gu Yuan also reacted. He weakly threw a pillow at Yan. "Why did you scare her?" Yan hugged the pillow, grinning nonchalantly. "You can still throw pillows, it seems you really are fine. Get lost." Only he and I were left in the room. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. I had overreacted and felt a bit embarrassed, so I chose to remain silent. "When you were writing love letters to me, you were all sweet and daring. Now that I'm in front of you, why have you turned mute?" Still able to tease me, he truly was fine. My face flushed. "You wrote to me first, I was just trying to cooperate." Gu Yuan gave a meaningful "oh." Suddenly, he propped himself up. He had injuries, and I was worried about hurting him, so I helped him a bit, but he unexpectedly leaned into my support and kissed my forehead. "Is this cooperation?" I looked up, falling into his deep, dark eyes. My heart raced like a drum, and I quickly averted my gaze, dropping a hasty, "I'll make you medicine," before fleeing. I heard joyful laughter behind me. Gu Yuan had successfully managed the flood and collected evidence against Prince Lin for attempting to kill him, which he presented. He told me it was all thanks to the letters we exchanged, which confused Prince Lin, allowing his plan to go so smoothly. Prince Lin was stripped of his title and confined to his residence. But I still felt it wasn't enough. In the dead of night, I quietly snuck into Prince Lin's residence and broke both his hands. Finally, some justice had been served. After 3 months of recovery, Gu Yuan returned to his extravagant life. He was busy with bird taming, listening to music, drinking, and playing cards, occasionally annoying the emperor, who scolded him for being unambitious, but he brushed it off and continued to enjoy his music and dance. I had once thought about advising him, but now I saw he was truly wise. He could navigate the power struggles without a scratch, stay above suspicion, and live a life of luxury. And one more thing, Jing Yan had married Shi Shi. The incident began when Shi Shi stormed into the Su residence, claiming she and Jing Yan had an intimate relationship. This caused quite a commotion, and Jing Yan had no choice but to marry her. Uncle Su fell ill from anger, and when I went to visit him, Gu Yuan accompanied me. When did Uncle Su and Gu Yuan start discussing private matters? I waited outside for Gu Yuan, and Jing Yan came over, still not giving up. Ran, I just realized the only person I love is you. If you're willing, I'll take you away, to the ends of the earth, and we'll never be apart. I replied, what's done cannot be undone. After going out, I asked Gu Yuan what he and Uncle Su talked about, and he tapped my head, saying I would know in time. So mysterious. On the day Jing Yan married Shi Shi, both Gu Yuan and I attended the ceremony. On the way back, Gu Yuan glanced at me. Good job, you didn't cry. As a reward, I'll take you to see the lanterns later. I thought to myself, what a relic of the past. Since the last time Gu Yuan returned from the south, our relationship had become increasingly strange. It was fine outside the residence, but inside, he didn't hide it at all. Sometimes he would drape his arm over my shoulder, pull my sleeve, or even steal my food at dinner. Butler Zhang's gaze towards me also grew warmer. With things developing this way, I had somewhat anticipated it and indulged all his actions. I planned to confess tonight, to break through the ambiguous barrier between us. We were children of the martial world, unafraid of anything. But when I looked around, I realized I had lost him. I couldn't help but laugh and cry, but I still went to buy a lantern first, writing a poetic line on it before heading out to find him. I saw him across the street, and he walked over. Ran, I'm a handsome man, you should focus on keeping up. If another girl snatches me away, you'll be crying. I softly replied, cautiously reaching out to grab a bit of his sleeve and handing him the lotus lantern. I was extremely nervous. I didn't feel this way even when I married Jing Yan. He suddenly fell silent and stared at me. My hand was getting tired from holding it out, and he hadn't taken it. My heart trembled slightly, and I withdrew my hand, but he took the lantern immediately, wrapping his arms around my waist to shield me from the crowd. I smiled, my heart finally settled. He led me to the lakeside. There were many young men and women releasing lanterns by the river. Gu Yuan glanced at the poetic line on the lotus lantern, exquisite dice and red beans, into the bones lovesickness know not to know. After reading it, he leaned in and asked me, with his peach blossom eyes sparkling, Ran, does this mean what I think it does? Yes. At this point, I couldn't be shy anymore, but I've been married before. If I marry again, will it bring shame to the heir's residence? What nonsense are you talking about? He pulled me into his embrace. Who dares to say a word? I'll tear their mouth apart. But I have an illness, you don't mind? I shook my head. I don't mind. I hadn't even had him take my medicine yet. Even if it had no effect, I wouldn't care. Release the lantern. That night, I witnessed a myriad of splendor unfold before me. Ran, will you marry me? Yes. But I didn't expect the wedding to happen so quickly. On the first day, he visited the Su residence to propose to Uncle Su and Aunt Su. On the second day, preparations were made. By the third day, I was married. Everything was surprisingly well organized. Later, I learned that on that day Uncle Su was ill, and he had a long private conversation with him, during which he expressed his desire to marry me. He had already prepared the betrothal gifts in advance. On our wedding night, he propped himself up, hovering over me. I said, you really don't need to force yourself. Shall we drink the medicine first? Gu Yuan's gaze paused. I pushed him away and brought over the prepared medicine. I understand that such matters concern dignity. Don't be too nervous, we can take it slow. Gu Yuan finally understood what was in the bowl. With a dangerous glint in his eyes, he took the medicine away, lifted me effortlessly, and placed me on the bed. He tugged at my wedding robe, his voice husky. Ran, do you want to give it a try? As the lanterns flickered and the light fabric of the curtains swayed amidst the rising tide of desire, I gasped in pain, tears welling up in my eyes. You lied to me. Gu Yuan's face flushed with a seductive hue, his eyes filled with an unsettling desire. Ran, I'm also in pain. Just bear with it, it will be fine after this. After a night of indulgence, I was utterly exhausted and didn't rise until late morning. When I woke up, I found Gu Yuan sitting across from me, holding a cup of tea, looking quite satisfied. He came over and fed me half a cup. I wanted more and asked for another. This is quite good. Post-ceremony tea, of course, it's good, he teased. I nearly spat out the tea, lightly pushing him away, my tone unintentionally playful. Why are you still deceiving me? Clearly what? Gu Yuan pulled me into his embrace and gently kissed my lips. Am I brave and impressive? I truly couldn't hear a word without getting flustered. His hand slipped beneath the blanket. I felt my face heat up slightly and grabbed his restless hand. Overindulgence is harmful. You don't understand, my dear. Holding back too much isn't good either. He pulled down the curtains. Gu Yuan and I spent a full 3 days together before we finally saw the sun properly. Butler Zhang brought in a nourishing soup, one large bowl for each of us, with no one left out. On that day, Gu Yuan took me to a tavern. Butler Zhang was driving while we collided with another carriage. As I lifted the curtain, I saw the couple Jing Yan and Shi Shi in the opposite carriage. Jing Yan had scratch marks on his face, and Shi Shi looked like a disgruntled wife. I had heard bits and pieces about how the Su couple was quite restless, quarreling every 3 days and fighting every 5 days. It was said that at one point, Jing Yan had refrained from hitting Shi Shi because she was a woman but eventually couldn't hold back anymore, abandoning any gentlemanly demeanor. Each time they caused a scene, the tea houses in the capital had new gossip. These two had indeed become somewhat famous. When Jing Yan spotted me, his eyes lit up momentarily before dimming again, fixated on the mark on my neck. I suddenly remembered that I had a kiss mark left by Gu Yuan on my neck. Officer Su, Gu Yuan leaned out, wrapping his arm around me with a smile. What a coincidence. Heir Apparent Yuan. My Ran is hungry, we'll go ahead, Gu Yuan said, expressionless as he lowered the curtain. Turning back, he kissed me softly, and I wrapped my arms around his neck. After a long while, he finally released me, his peach blossom eyes sparkling. You did well. I smiled, realizing he had been stewing in jealousy for too long. I leaned softly against him. Let's return to our room early tonight. Gu Yuan's body stiffened, his gaze darkening. I quickly said seriously, Gu Yuan, you still haven't told me about that time in the plum garden. Did you save me? Gu Yuan looked a bit awkward, replying stiffly, no. I smiled knowingly. Oh, then I'll go. Try saying that again? Gu Yuan playfully bit my lips. You little ungrateful one. I decided to sit fully in his lap, mimicking him by giving him a light peck. Gu Yuan, let's have a baby.